So day 5 of the Richard Satchwell, the murder trial, that he's standing trial for the murder of his wife, Tina Satchwell, in March of 2017. But it's interesting to see that essentially this case, the investigation into her disappearance, takes a turn in August 2021. You heard evidence of this when a now Superintendent Anne-Marie Twomey is appointed as the SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer in the case. And she essentially has told the court today she did what would be seen as almost a cold case review.
Yes, so she was assigned the case. She'd been actually promoted to Detective Inspector just shortly before August the 16th when she was appointed to the case. But it was all the cases, I think, that the Detective Inspector rank had been investigating at that stage. And so she began a review of the material in the room. There was a detective garda that we heard some evidence from before already in the case, Dave Kelleher. He was promoted as well to the incident room coordinator. So these are the two people who have access to all the files, everything that has come in. So they reviewed everything, all the material witness statements, the CCTV, the details of the first search of number 3 Grattan Street, that looked at the crime photos, inquiries with international police, taxi companies, ports, passport office, all the exhibits that were seized in 2017, and they engaged then with medical personnel, estate agents, the media interviews, and all the inquiries into reported sightings. And there was actually 60 to 65 sightings of Tina, both here in Ireland and abroad, and they had to go through check these out with the assistance of Interpol. A DNA profile had been created from a hairbrush that was taken in the first search in 2017, and a DNA profile had been created from that, and that was part of the yellow notice that had distributed to Interpol to help assist any foreign police check if Tina Satchwell had turned up on their patch. So they went through all of the various the searches and the interviews, and they identified their own new lines of inquiry. And when they got to about January 2022, she formed the opinion that Tina Satchwell had died unlawfully. So that was kind of a step forward in the I suppose the investigation at this stage.
So that was the first time they had sort of decided she was dead. Up to that point, she was still missing, treated as a missing person?
Up to that point, it was a missing persons case, and now it was. Well, I suppose it was still a missing persons case, but they feel she had died unlawfully. So the
headspace within the investigation team was they weren't looking for somebody who was alive anymore.
Yeah, so that was in August 2022. So they're still going through all the various lines of inquiry, which is including seeking orders to get email access, dealing with the likes of Microsoft and Google, and getting all the ducks in a row with that, and downloading it or extracting all the information from different devices that had been seized.
And when had those devices been seized, did you hear?
Well, these were the laptops that we heard about already in court, about the two that were taken in the search in June 2017, and they found different, I suppose, now this is later after Detective Inspector Anne-Marie Twomey has given her evidence. Her colleague Dave Kelleher was explaining about the extraction of this material, and they were able to get a kind of a full forensic readout of the two laptops, and there was a couple of email accounts associated with those. So they were able to go through all those. So there was other lines of inquiry. They had engaged, the services of a geospatial expert for some kind of analysis. They had a building specialist. They also had a forensic archaeologist as well. And by August of that year, she believed that there was reasonable grounds for Richard Satchwell's arrest for murder, as the way she put it.
August of 2022.
This is August of 2022. So
so they were looking at those kind of experts are looking at the Satchwell property in Youghal, presumably. They're there to look at that because I think now Superintendent Anne-Marie Twomey said that she didn't believe that Tina Satchwell had, at some point during her sort of what we'll call a cold case investigation, she didn't believe she'd actually left the house alive, essentially.
Yeah, well, she did that in September 23. That's when she concluded, right? Mm-hmm. She had never left the house, and they continued then with their various investigations to establish, I suppose, that they were going the right direction. And then it was on the 9th of October that year then when she went to a district court judge with a search warrant was sought and obtained for the second search of 3 Grattan Street. In cross-examination, the difference between this search warrant and the previous one was the previous one was carried out because it was on the grounds of the fear of assault causing harm. And this is the one where there's the luminol search and, the laptops are taken and there was no blood traces found in the luminol search. And this one was basically for a murder charge. So they actually describe how they knocked on the door on the 10th of October at 5 o'clock on this in 2023. And she identified herself to Richard Satchwell and went inside and explained further who she was and what they were doing and told them it was going to be a very different search this time. It was going to be an intrusive or invasive search. And her colleague Dave Kelleher arrested him at 5:06 p.m. So that's when the full search began, that we know from the opening statements that they discover Tina Satchwell's skeletal remains buried in the house. But we haven't heard this yet in evidence. So this is how far the trial has got. So like her colleague then, Dave Kelleher, he was on the stand as well in relation to his involvement in the case. And he was talking about, as I mentioned, extracting the information from the laptops, which also included evidence of a search for quicklime and a YouTube video showing the reaction of when water is poured on quicklime. And this was, I think, 4 days after they believe she was killed on the 20th of March. This is on the 24th of March that these were looked at. And so he explained the process of getting access to all the emails, and again goes into the details about what he termed the monkey conversation. And there was one of those emails included exchanges over 2 years with this, I think, international monkey rescue.
So starting in about 2015?
Yes, so this is starting in 2015. And this began, the Thelma and Terry were the two marmoset monkeys for which the emails indicated Richard Satchwell had already spent money.
Starting to adopt.
And they're either going to adopt or purchase. But like we know then from cross-examining Brendan Grehan, when he cross-examined him, he said this was a scam, and that the Gardaí concluded as well it was a scam at the time, that they'd sent a lot of money through various Western Union outlets and no monkeys had arrived. So it certainly does look that way.
Mm. Is it worth doing a little sort of just a rehash on the timeline for the listeners and viewers on it? Because this case so far in the evidence has been disjointed in the timeline, really, hasn't it? You've gone from, we spoke about yesterday, from sort of the March of 2017, quickly jumping to essentially October 2023, when her body is ultimately found and when the state say she had been killed all the way back in 2017. The state have said at the opening case that they believe that Richard Satchwell killed her after a sort of an argument, that she was put initially into a freezer in the back garden, and then that he wrapped her remains and hid her under the stairs and poured concrete over her. But let's start with March 2017, and it's he goes into a police station to report his wife missing.
Yeah, in 20th of March, the 24th of March is when he goes into Fermoy Garda Station and does kind of an informal report. And the guard there kind of notifies his colleagues in Youghal, who do kind of a welfare check with Richard Satchwell a couple of days later. And it isn't until around the 10th or 11th of May that year that there's an official missing persons report.
Made by him?
Made by him. And then there's another more formal statement is taken off him a couple of days later. And then there is a review of the case at that stage, and they look at it a bit more closely, and they do carry out a search of the house in June 2017, which is relevant today because there's evidence about some of the items that were seized, although the information wasn't really in the guards' hands until January 2022, but they came from devices that were seized in 2017. And also, one of the devices was the phone that Richard Satchwell was using in 2017. He still had it in 2023, and they were using that then as well. So these were all downloaded and the information extracted. And this is what David Kelleher was giving in evidence today.
This discovery of what was on these devices was only made in this sort of what we're calling a cold case review over the course of this Superintendent Anne-Marie Twomey and David Kelleher sort of taking over the investigation as such. But between, so we're up to June of 2017, he gives is it June of, what's the next sort of date we've had?
So, well, the way we've kind of heard it in terms of the timeline, we get up to the 24th. Like the 24th of March is when the world knows that Tina Satchwell is missing.
Yes.
And then the search is carried out in the house in June that year.
June of 2017.
So obviously there's a lot of, there's alluded to in some of the statements that we've heard that he's made to the guards that, there was talk of Tina having run off with a Polish guy, or that there was violence in the relationship. And he was asked directly in some of these media interviews that he did, say, from June, July 2017 up until January, February, I think, in 2018, he was doing these media interviews, and there was there was different kind of, he was giving information in all of these, including I think talking about a best friend, a woman called Angela, which he was then asked about in this enhanced cognitive interview that we heard about yesterday, which happened, I think, in 2021. Although, again, that kind of finalized script from that, or transcript from that, wasn't in the Garda files until January 2022 when it was signed off by Richard Satchwell, and he made these couple of changes to it. And we heard about that yesterday. His statement saying, personally, I still think she's still alive. So like the phone...
We're seeing very little in the timeline, or you have heard in evidence, little in the timeline between essentially sort of the years 2018, 2019, 2020. We haven't heard a huge amount of what's gone on, except for this cognitive interview he gave.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So I mean, and I suppose it coincides with the COVID period, which it was mentioned in cross-examination today that the COVID period, didn't help progress, or there was no progress during a certain period.
But that started in 2020 as opposed to 2018-19, was it?
Yeah, well, it was actually. Yeah. But anyway, as they went through the various emails, again, as I mentioned, like one of them was the monkey email thread that David Kelleher was led through that by the Council for State Geraldine Small, and there was stuff. There was some of these where they were read out to the jury. I think the jury are actually given copies of these.
Right.
And there was things like there was an email from, the Monkey Rescue International. It says, "I'll call the general director, and if you can figure out the payment, we'll have Mr. James give you a call and organise all this." And Richard responds, "Look, I haven't spoken to Mr. James, but as I said, we're not in a position to pay. I've lost my job, and I've gone all over Ireland to pay you." Right. So we're kind of getting now. I think the significance in that was that it was sent at 10:42 on the day he said he'd gone to Dungarvan. And he mentioned he'd left the house at 10, and again the CCTV of the post office. This is all kind of as they're double checking his version of events and where he's been. But one of the things that they downloaded as well was the Samsung phone he was using. And David Kelleher, the detective sergeant, now he was explaining that they got a court order from Google for the email address, his Google email address, and they were able to get it contained 25,000 GPS coordinates associated with his email address, and that was basically his phone, the device. So they were able to show basically where the device had been on the days in question, and like it paralleled with everything that we've heard so far in terms of going to the car boot sale in Carrantoul on the Sunday, staying at home. He didn't move. On the Monday then, initially he had said that he left at 10, and they're saying like, he was at the post office, I think at 11:16, and then he went back to the house at 11:20. This is coming off the GPS on the phone. And
the GPS on the phone is only being downloaded or sort of investigated in October of 2023. So your phone has the ability to have tracked you back to 2017.
They were able to do it from the Google account. So like it's something he did explain that it's something that you have to opt into. So it's not automatically on, but I'm sure there's other apps.
It's on mine. Anyway. I'm just saying, definitely I have.
But yeah. So we're hearing all this today, and it was very kind of, I suppose, intense and dense evidence. Like just to give you a sample, it's kind of like, Friday 24th of March, travels to Fermoy, leaves at 3:06 p.m. to the Nissan Fermoy, 16:04, and then 16:11 back to the clinic. The device was in the clinic for a period until 16:50, and then it's back to Nissan Fermoy, which is presumably a garage. And then at 7:12, he was at a house in Burness Place in Fermoy. A relative of Tina was there. From there, goes up to St. Mary's Crescent at 17:55. Then to Fermoy Garda Station at 8:15, was there for approximately 45 minutes. And then back to number 3 Grattan Street in Youghal at 19:40. So there was
traced.
So they went through 8 days of this, like, you know, so all the various movements, including...
Go back to what you said about was on the emails, or sorry, on the Google search, was it about the lime?
Yeah, now just a short bit about this. This is one of the, I suppose, some of the information that the officer picked out from the Google download, and it was just the timing of it. Like, you know, it would have been the day 4 after Tina was presumably murdered, or is allegedly murdered, and that night, you know, was looking up quicklime. It was just a search for quicklime, and then a YouTube video on water reacting with quicklime, which is kind of bubbles and it reacts furiously. This is played for the jury.
And did it detail during the case today if that information was coming off the laptop which had been seized in 2017, or off the phone which was only seized in 23?
This was coming off the laptop, one of the laptops that was seized in 2017. And then under cross-examination, Brendan Graham asked the officer, like, you know, what was quicklime used for, and kind of he was, you know, he agreed with counsel. Yeah, you know, it can be used for construction, but it's also used to as an odor suppressant, and agreed then it's also used to, I suppose, to quicken up the decomposition process as well. So this is all this is all kind of teased out in cross-examination rather than in direct evidence from Detective Kelleher. There was also a second tranche of texts with the monkey people, you know, and it's, you know, he's, you know, talking about, I'm in a mess right now. My wife has said she's leaving me over this. You know, this is Richard Satchwell to one of the Mr. James, who's trying to sell him the marmoset monkeys that never turn up. And
have you ever heard about this monkey adoption thing?
No, I haven't. And again, you know, it does look like a scam, and you know, and this was aired in court today as well. You know, Brendan Grant, you know, said it to guard, were you able to get to the bottom of this? And you know, is it a scam? I mean, it looks like a scam. And he says, well, the guard says the monkeys never turned up.
Is suggesting this is a scam and that it's causing. Did Brendan Graham make any commentary around what is in the emails, in that, you know, my wife is leaving me over this? Did he make any comments around that?
No, there wasn't specifically on that. Like he did actually, he went into some of the evidence that was heard yesterday. So with this cognitive interview that was done by Detective David Noonan. And so we heard that yesterday, but there was no cross-examination after that. Court finished relatively late, so there was a cross-examination today about that. And he more or less got him to explain the process and how it worked and why you do it. And he was asking, you know, was there any particular reason why you did it at this point? And you know, was Satchwell a murder suspect?
Was in June of 20.
This is in 2021 when this enhanced
this
cognitive interview happened. Yeah. And so he was he was asking about this, and that's what the David Noonan was kind of, he was explaining, look, it's just that there isn't enough necessarily information in previous statements, so it's there to kind of help progress the investigation anyway. The whole idea that it's completely relaxed and there might be new information come up, but it's, you know, this advanced witness statement, as he was calling them, like, it is usually a significant witness who would be given the opportunity to do this. And like he did say, like, yeah, this is the same suite that would be used for people who have suffered child sexual abuse. And that he was asked that in court today, and he said, yes, it would be the same suite, the same type of thing. Like, Satchwell's defense counsel kind of went through the interview and just kind of asked him, you know, like, so he did talk about. So he did talk about, you know, his brother dying of suicide and Tina Satchwell's brother dying by suicide. And he did, you know, he was asking him to kind of confirm that all these things were said. And it was very much...
and that wasn't given in evidence, in direct evidence, was it, about that interview? From memory, well, certainly we didn't speak about it. If it was given,
the enhanced,
we spoke about the enhanced, but we didn't specifically discuss that he had been asked about his brother and her brother's suicides, did we?
No, well, it's been alluded to in court. Like, you know,
right.
we did know that her brother had died by suicide in 2012, and that Richard was talking about in his statements that her mood had changed from this. And that, and from like she used to kind of be in tears or fly off the handle, and her mood had gotten worse. They weren't sexual again, like after her brother's death.
After that, so that was all coming from Satchwell.
So these were the interviews. Like that was actually in that the enhanced interview, the special witness kind of thing. So like he goes through that, and he's just asked to kind of clarify, like he described that how she could get violent, was very hot-headed, and he go, and that's that kind of thing again. Yes, that's right. And he said he talked about once taking a bottle of tablets, yes, and that he went to a doctor with injuries in 1994, that she could lose her temper unexpectedly. And he describes again the injuries that Satchwell would have received, which are black eyes, bite marks, cuts on the head, on the forearm, scrolls on the back, and belly, and he said, that sounds bad but when you spread over 28 years, it's not that. He plays it down, doesn't he? Is the approach that Brendan Grehan is taking.
He's saying that Satchwell plays down the violence.
Yes, yeah, and he said, he also says, like, and he's asking the officer who did the interview, he's asked him to confirm that, he's talked about taking loving care of each other, of her, massaging her every night, and that they loved their pets together. That said that she spent a lot of time crying, particularly since the death of her brother. And in his relationship to Tina, he could never say no. And this is all agreed by the Garda witness. And he said, you went through in great detail, like on the day she disappeared, about what she was wearing, the clothes that she was wearing, the pajamas. And he said, he specifically described them, the tartan blue PJ bottoms and a lilac and with blue in it robe. And he says those items, those are items that will have a significance later. The jury will hear. So we're going to hear more about... We're going to hear more about all this.
Brendan Grehan said that?
Yeah, that would have been... That was the defence counsel
said that in relation to what she was wearing when she went missing.
So they're talking about... so he's going over some of the interview, not all of it, but he's going over, I suppose... He's trying to get a picture himself or show a picture of where Richard Satchwell is coming from.
Well, it gives you hints of the defence, doesn't it? When a witness is being cross-examined by the barrister representing Satchwell, it gives you little hints of where they're going to go with the defence, doesn't it? So he's homing in on the fact that Satchwell has described this sort of violent relationship, that he's very caring to Tina Satchwell, and that he doesn't overplay the sort of the violence that's happening within the home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's certainly. That's the impression you'd form sitting in court. And again, I suppose going back then to kind of the downloaded material that David Kelleher was talking about, there was also all the various text messages, not just with the monkey people, but also with Sarah Howard, Tina's cousin. And in this time period, in the couple of weeks, or I'd say up until about July of 2017, there was a couple of texts back and forth. Have you heard from her? And you have been able to contact, and he'd name different people. Have you been, and then he'd say, I've got them. And then it wasn't. It was kind of a sporadic, but there was quite a lot of texts, but they wouldn't necessarily always be answered straight away. I think his cousin, she would sometimes be in work and she wouldn't be able to answer the call. There was missed calls listed and all that kind of stuff. So he was certain, and he was asking her if she would go with him to Killarney to visit a relative there, which he did on, I think it was the Tuesday after he had first kind of gone into Fermoy.
Is this given in evidence by Detective Garda Kelleher, or is this under cross-examination?
This is in direct evidence. So they're going through all this. So all these I suppose printouts of text messages, they're all they've been downloaded using Cellbrite, which he was asked to describe that, and he says there's a forensic tool available to An Garda Síochána, and they're able to basically extract information from a phone and present it in a readable fashion. So these are all being given to the jury as well. So they have copies of all these various texts that went through, as well as they made maps as well of the geolocation. And they also had he mentioned that they had a retired naval officer who's an expert in this area, who also looked at the data to ensure that they were getting the locations right or whatever, or did the report. So the maps were made, and these were also handed to the jury as well, with the timings, exactly when he was in various places like Carrantoola.
Because your phone hits off a cell site, doesn't it? And, which can be in the area, or a mast. Is that how they can track?
Well, this is you're tracking yourself. It's using your own phone as a GPS locator. It's feeding it back. So it's constantly, even if it's sitting in your pocket. This was again heard. Even if it's sitting in your pocket while you're watching TV,
it's terrifying.
And then you decide to nip out and walk the dog for 10 minutes and back, it's going to show up, where you've been in those 10, 15 minutes.
But it's something that you can opt into. It's interesting, the evidence in regards to all of this, because it just shows how developed the phones are, and how obviously they do track you and literally your every move.
They can do if you yes, without a doubt.
If you enable it, which I'm sure mine is definitely enabled. Let's have a look. I think did Brendan Grehan at one point, and maybe this was, we're jumping a little bit, but maybe this was while he was cross-examining Superintendent Twomey, did he ask her, was there anything preventing the Gardaí conducting an invasive search of the house, including excavation, in June 2017? That's when they first went in and sort of did a search, but a non-invasive one. I mean, it's October 2023, which is 6 and a bit years later, when they do this excavation. But did he ask Superintendent Twomey, was there anything preventing them in 2017?
Yeah, he asked her in her review of all the material in the incident room, was there a report of the search? And she explained that, there was all the statements from the officers who would have carried out the search, including the ones we've heard from already, the photographer, the Forensic Science Ireland scientist who came down and did the spray blood test. So there would have been, anyone who took part in it would have given all their statements. So they would have had all that. He asked a number of times, look, was there a report? And she eventually, well, not eventually, but she did say that if there was a report, she didn't know, or she couldn't recall if there was. And it was also something they asked David Kelleher as well. And again, he was explaining, they had all the various statements from the people involved. And that, he said if there was a condensed report as such, he wasn't aware of it. And he can say, well, you be the officers to know that as the coordinating officer. And he said, yes. So, I mean, he was asking, was there a specific report? And it was about exactly where they searched or what they didn't search. This is what Brendan Grehan was looking for, if there was a reason, or, it wasn't if there was a reason. He was looking for a detailed report exactly on what they searched, and if they hadn't searched under a stairs or under something, that's how he just wanted to know that was there. And then he asked, he asked the detective inspector Emery Twomey what exactly was the difference between a full search and a surface search, because she had mentioned in her in the search warrant when she was going for it that a previous surface search had been done, and he wanted to know the difference. And she explained, look, it's up to the investigating officers at the time if they make a decision on how far they want to go with the search. And the initial search was, as we heard, it was to do with assault causing harm, whereas the second invasive search was to do with a murder charge. It was to do with suspected murder. So obviously, I mean, she was just saying it's up to that. She can't answer for previous. She can't answer for previous. Officers, and that they make the decision on how far they want to go in these searches.
So, and that was pretty much wrapping up today's evidence, I take it. Was there an indication of what is coming next? Because obviously this October 2023 search of the property as Satchwell is in custody, and what he is saying in custody at that point is going to be the really sort of sensational stuff out of this trial.
Well, we do know, like when they were going through David Kelleher's cross-examination, it was mentioned that one of the places that they found he went to was Oriel House Hotel, where he had done, I think, a kind of a safety course, a CPC course. And it was mentioned that, and we will hear from them. So we're going to hear, I think, from all of these people that are getting mentioned. So, I mean, for instance, like he spoke about...
And Satchwell had done this safety course at some point in the aftermath of her going missing.
Yes, yeah.
We're going to hear from witnesses who are going to say what he was doing between 2017 and 23.
And no, this was like literally, this was like within a week or two after...
She goes missing.
After she goes missing.
Yeah.
After they believe she was murdered on the 19th or the 20th of March.
Mm-hmm.
So there was also, like David Kelleher was talking about, they got a court order, so they got all the details in the Ulster Bank, and they had a forensic accountant attached to the Economic Crime Bureau, supplied all the relevant material to them, and that they basically said there was one bank account in the household, it was in Richard's name, and it was constantly an unauthorised overdraft. So in other words, they were in the red all the time. And that the sale of the house in Twomey, after everything was taken into account and all the money they had left over, they would have had a balance of €370. And he said they didn't have the capacity to accumulate anything near this 26,000 that Richard Satchwell is saying she took from the house when she left.
Okay. Ever.
So
when they sold the house in Twomey and bought the house in Youghal, and through the forensic accounting, they were saying from the beginning all they would have ever had was €300 profit.
This is yeah.
Okay.
Well, they'd moved house and they were in their new house,
and
they had €376 over, according to the forensic accountant who worked out. And again, having looked at their bank accounts over whatever relevant period, that they didn't have the capacity to save anything like that kind of sum of money that he suggested that was in this tin.
Fascinating. So tomorrow, day 6.
Yes, be more of it.
We'll see now whether we move into the actual search and the intricacies of that. I think it's definitely, the evidence is fascinating so far, isn't it? Again, he's just sitting there taking it all in.
Well, he's sitting, the jury are right across from him, and like he just normally sits with his hand in his head. He didn't look up at there was even actually one of the phones that were downloaded. There was 3 pictures taken. And one of them was a third party taking a picture of the two of them walking in the park in Twomey, holding hands, holding the dog. There was another picture of when Heidi the dog passed away in November 22. There was a picture on the phone of the ashes and a certificate from the cremation company. And then there was a third picture, a kind of a little shrine to their pets on one of Tina as well, and the little box with the ashes of Heidi the dog. And he didn't look up at, he didn't look out of anything whenever even the quick lime video was being played or the messages are put up. He kept his head down. All
right, okay, well, we look forward to hearing the evidence from tomorrow. Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.